something's going on inside the engine. So let's find out what it is.
Break it down.
Oh, welcome back guys. We've got the turbo off. Now usually that's because something bad's happened. So we've had this G45 1600 on for a while, but the issue with them is they sort of get to a point and they just nose over. And I've heard it from a lot of different tuners, especially on Barras and things like that, where they sort of get up around that 1100 horsepower and then they can't make anymore. So a little bit of a design flaw possibly with the compressor wheel from what we're hearing. Now the guys down south, what they do is put a precision wheel on the front. So changes from an 80mm, which it currently is, up to an 85mm precision compressor wheel. Now to do that, they obviously have to machine out the front cover too. So it'll be interesting. We'll throw it back on the Dyno 101 if we can talk Varun into doing that for us. And we'll see what the difference is at the sort of the same boost levels, and we'll see if it wants to keep pushing past and obviously maybe flow a bit more. Righto, we're all boxed up. Let's send it to these guys and we'll get it back. We'll see how long it takes these boys to do it. They reckon it's a pretty quick turnaround, so that'll be cool. And we'll get it on the dyno. Now before we go and bolt this new turbo on, what we do have to do, we've got to be a bit cautious. We'll pull off the sump and go in and check out what our bearings are doing on the rods. So biggest thing is we are putting this little engine through a lot of pain. The best thing we can do is keep an eye on those big end bearings. If one of those to spin, we're going to have a rod flinging around inside that block trying to make its way out. We definitely don't want that. Right, I'll show you the good part first. That's the big end bearings. That's pretty good wear for what we've done. Now the bad part are these little pieces of something. So I had to figure out what they were. Now what they were thrust bearing materials. So there's thrust bearings inside engines obviously that stop the crank going backwards and forwards. And I put the dial gauge on this crank and we've got 17 thou. It should only be about 6. And I always monitor it. This is the first time I've actually seen that excessive. So we're gonna have to pull the motor out. Sometimes when there's only one ear on a Saturday, you've got to improvise. Hope he goes high enough to get over the car. Easy. Well, that was pretty simple. Now I thought we'd try something a bit different. Usually I'd take all the front timing cover off, but if we ever have to do this on the road, it's always good to know if you can sort of sneak this stuff off, doing it different ways. So obviously all the timing cover and everything's still on, and the only place it seals is at the front, so that's quite common on most motors. So the jacking bolts on these billet blocks that come in from here and wind through to actually pop it off the block nice and easy, they're real big benefit of these billet blocks. So the reason we're in here is our crank's moving too far backwards and forwards. Most cranks anywhere 4 to 7 thou, I would have thought is pretty normal. We've got 17. So in here we're going to have a worn out thrust bearing. Now there's two. There's one that works when the crank's getting pushed that way under usually acceleration, and the other one works opposite. These fail on big horsepower cars no matter what you're sort of doing. Big clutch cars, big converters with the start line power we have to put in. It's quite hard on these things, especially being just this little 180 degree bearing. Now, this is going to be really hard to show you, but the movement we're looking at is just this. That little tiny bit there, that's enough to be concerned about, believe it or not. So before we pull it out, we can even see a bit of a dead giveaway there, how the bearing material is trying to come out the side. Now that little piece of bearing come out from the inside of that, so that's what I was seeing in the sump. Now that shows you the difference between a brand new one and what we've just pulled out of this engine. Now you got to remember this has been in there for the life of this billet block since we've had it, which is well over a year now. So it's probably not a bad effort. There's not a lot of bearing material there. Now this is the one out of the front side. Obviously does a lot less work. It's not sitting there getting pushed on by the converter and everything. So that one is probably good to go. So these little things with the pieces in the sump, that was the dead giveaway that something wasn't right. I was expecting it to be the big end bearings, to be honest, not the thrust. It's the first time we've had issues with this. We always monitor it. So it's always good to know what the norm seems to be for your own setup, and then when something changes, you know you better go hunting. Sorry about the filming, guys, this is hard work, but just to show you that zeroed off, now with the new thrust washer in,
we have about 4, so that's not too bad. Well, that's lucky. Lucky we didn't destroy the crank. It's just the sake of replacing a $20 thrust bearing, so that's an easy fix. 4 thou is where we are. Now factory Honda specs say between 4 to 6 thou. So we'll just monitor that every sort of meeting, and that's going to tell us how long it's going to be in between replacing it, that's for sure. Now some of you long-time subscribers would have seen this little jig. So what it's for, with a steel rod engine, your bearings come like that. You don't need to put a hole in them, but with aluminium rods, I'll show you soon, you actually need to have a hole in them which locates it on the cap of the rod. So it's a 3/16 hole, and this was just a simple jig I made out of a rod that ended up flying out of one of the blocks that we used to own. So it did come in handy after all. And that's the little pin I'm talking about that holds that bearing in. That does most of the work. They still have the tangs, obviously, but that pin is in all aluminium rods. Well, we're talking about motors. This is just a customer's build. So a sleeved K24 Darton sleeves. They're all done by JOH Engineering. This is the first time we've ever fit up one of these drag car tail timing covers. In my opinion, they fit far nicer than a lot of the other ones out there on the market. This part here is heavy duty. The other ones we've used, they get quite flimsy. You can see just the size of the plate and everything. When you usually pop that off the 2 bolts, it leaks around here. If anyone's ever going to pick one of them, I've learned a lesson today, that's for sure. I know which one I'd go next time. A couple of Dash 12 bungs we added on for breathing. We all know these K-series want to breathe. What do you reckon, Bags? Time for a bit of nitrous?
Yep, looks good, eh?
How does that work?
Goes in there and sprays out there.
That's what we want. Direct port nitrous plates. That's one of our own products, actually. So we've got a few out there on cars. There's one little Civic in Australia especially that runs them. And I think he's got about 150 shot running through that. So we're going to do the same, probably about 100, 120 horsepower in it. We'll use it for the trans brake, and then we'll have it on a bit of a button maybe for halfway down the track. Now I think a lot of people get a bit confused how these work. These fittings are an NOS brand actual fitting. They hold the jet. So there's the jet sitting in place, and then the Dash 3 line comes over the top and tightens down on it. And that's what seals that, and that obviously goes off to your nitrous solenoid. And then when that's sandwiched between the intake manifold and the head, all we have is a couple of lines that go under that. It keeps it all really nice and neat. Righto, there's an example of all the plumbing for the nitrous plates. So the nitrous jets are hidden in between that fitting and the pipe, little Dash 3, down to a T-piece, off to our nitrous solenoid. It's that easy. And just another OEM gasket on the other side of it, and off you go. One of the big things with these, you actually do have to use the air nozzle. Unfortunately for us, it's quite hard to get to on the car when everything's in there, so that's why I don't use it as much as I should. But from now on, I better start doing that. Righto, so we know what thrust bearing material looks like in the old Clearview. It's a bit of a dead giveaway. That's definitely the most amount of shit I've seen in that since we've been doing this. So good to see, good to know what different things actually are. So we're all back together. Now we're just waiting on this turbo from ProCharge to come back with this new, improved, bigger front compressor wheel. So hopefully that's not too far away. I really want to get it in so we can get it on the dyno up at 101, try out this nitrous, see if we can gain a little bit more from the turbocharger upgrade as well. Righto, something else we're going to do on the dyno, hopefully. We've made up this big Dash 3 line. We've got a spare sensor over here we used to use just for exhaust manifold pressure. So what I want to check is pre-intercooler pressure compared to manifold pressure, so we know if we've got a big drop there. Now if we do, the next thing we have to check is pressure drop after the intercooler and before the throttle body, and that's going to tell us if that little 75mm throttle body is behaving itself or if it needs to be bigger. So a couple of little tests on the dyno that's going to give us a lot of good information. And I'll make sure this comes in the kit with us when we're on the road. If we ever have a line fail or a sensor fail, I can easily switch it over in the Haltech and just run that line to whatever I need to. Massive thanks to Burst and Auto Parts. They hook us up with this oil, so it's quite expensive. And so far we can see from the bearing wear and stuff that it's not too bad. We can't blame the oil on the thrust bearing and the shiny bits we've seen before. But big end bearings, valve train components, we've been running this from the beginning. Oh, we got bags on the spanners. Time to put a bit of comfort back into the little car. Something we've found on these drag and drives. The car gets pretty warm, we can't hear the stereo, all because we took a bit of sound deadening out to save us weight. Now we're going to try and put in a bit of stuff that's a bit lighter weight to give us a bit of ride quality back, eh? A little bit of heat insulation under all the fuel pump controllers. Oh, Mr. Alexa will be happy about that. And then we'll see what else we can get in the back.
Good Lord.
We were going to run this, but it's bloody heavy. So we've opted for the Bunnings special 10mm adhesive foam. What do you reckon, Bags?
So we go, yes.
I think it's got to be better than, we don't want to, we've just basically pulled all that out. That's the original style Tari stuff. So let's put the foam in. Oh mate, look at that. We opted for both. We've used different ones in different places where we think it's probably a bit better suited. Should make a big difference, Bags. It'll be softer under the old jandals anyway. For 3 kilos of weight, I think it's going to be well worth it. What do you reckon, Bags?
Okay.
That's the story. I reckon it's going to make them beers taste even better driving down the road, not having to listen to as many things rattle. Now, I was really hoping we're going to have this turbo back so we can get all this done in one video. I don't think that's going to be the case, unfortunately. We've got the next video on the dyno is going to be quite a big one. So this is it for now. Thanks for watching. We'll see you guys soon.
Well, that was interesting.
Break it down.